I didn't want to be swallowed up. Actor Josh Hartnett on swapping Hollywood for Hampshire every morning. As soon as the actor Josh Hartnett wakes up in his home in the Hampshire countryside, there are mouths to be fed. Most obviously, those of his 4 young children. But also, the dogs, several guinea pigs, several more chickens, and a small herd of pygmy goats. The goats, Hartnett notes, are his favorites. They're the sweetest animals on the planet, he says over Zoom, from his home. They're like dogs. They would live in the house if they could. In fact, I've seen people having their goats in the house with diapers on, but we felt that was kinda cruel. Hartnett and his wife, the British actor Tamsin Egerton, spent lockdown here. For years they'd been living a ping-pong existence between the UK and the US. When their 3rd child was on the way, they decided to stay in Hampshire, and Hartnett has become a fixture in local village life ever since. Unlike when he's in New York or LA, where people only want to talk about your career. He says, here, nobody cares, which is just how he likes it. He's in the UK on a marriage visa, which means he can only be out of the country for work 180 days a year, or roughly 1 movie, which also suits him fine. At night, after the kids have been put to bed, he sometimes finds time to paint, his first love. But mostly, he says, this existence allows him to experience his children growing up in a way he otherwise wouldn't. This is all brand new to me, he says. I never would have expected it. And time passes quickly. With 4 children, you have so much to do. In a way, less is happening. But more of the important stuff is happening. My oldest daughter is 8.5 now. That feels like it happened in the last 2 years to me. So I'm trying to soak up as much as possible. Hartnett's Hollywood trajectory was a fairly common one. Interesting early indie roles saw his stock rise. Robert Rodriguez's The Faculty in 1998, Sofia Coppola's The Virgin Suicides a year later. Those parts catapulted him into big-time roles that required little more of him than to look lovelorn. 40 Days and 40 Nights, where his character gives up sex for Lent, heroic, Black Hawk Down, which was thrilling but thin, or heroic and lovelorn at the same time, the deeply terrible Pearl Harbor. But Hartnett didn't much like the attention that came with the big gigs. And before long he did the most unforgivable thing any would-be megastar could. He decided he didn't want to be one. He left LA, moved back to his home state of Minnesota, and parted company with his agents. Tabloids still bring up Hartnett's disappearance. What happened to Josh Hartnett? Screen Rant asked recently, though it's been almost 2 decades since he made the switch. In reality, Hartnett only stopped working for 18 months. But from then on he declined the bland heartthrob roles for which he was often suggested, and instead pushed for more challenging, smaller projects. He notably turned down the role of Superman twice. I just didn't want my life to be swallowed up by my work, he says now. And there was a notion at that time you just kind of give it all up. And you saw what happened to some people back then. They got obliterated by it. I didn't want that for myself. Hartnett is 46 now, and in the past few years, his career has shifted. For a while he took on interesting parts that didn't always come off. Films like Mozart and the Whale, 2005, a love story about 2 people with Asperger's, or Resurrecting the Champ, 2007, about a journalist who discovers a former heavyweight boxer living on the streets, or even The Black Dahlia, 2006, a highly anticipated James Ellroy adaptation. Some of those films were successful. Some of them were failures. But I was always swinging for something that was outside what people expected from me. But recent projects have come good. Last year alone saw him steal the show with a gloriously funny turn as a clueless Hollywood actor in an otherwise SOSO Guy Ritchie film, Operation Fortune, Ruse de Guerre, followed by an astronaut in a metaphysical love triangle in a standout episode of Black Mirror. Beyond the Sea, followed by a key role as a nuclear physicist in the Oscar-sweeping smash Oppenheimer. We're a hair's breadth away from someone calling it the Josh Renaissance. Next up is Trap from M. Night Shyamalan, the director of every film with a twist ending you've ever watched, The Sixth Sense, Signs, The Village, Old, etc. It sees Hartnett as a doting father who takes his daughter to a pop concert. The twist, which takes within the trailer, He's also a serial killer known as the Butcher. The entire concert is a trap laid on to catch him. A turbocharged cat-and-mouse caper. The pitch was Silence of the Lambs at a Taylor Swift concert. In casting Hartnett, Shyamalan spoke about how hard it is to find an actor like him. No sooner have movie stars become movie stars by landing the starring role that works for them, he said, they start to think about how they protect it. Before long, they start only playing real-life people or settling into franchises. And so to find somebody that's a bona fide movie star, that's a great human being and is willing to risk everything, man, that's a rare combination. And sometimes you think that doesn't exist anymore. And then he walked in. Which does beg the question, why the purple patch now? Hartnett, after all, left the safe roles behind back when Bush was president. It could, reckons Hartnett, be as simple as the rest of the industry sort of catching up with what I was always hoping to do. But also, he says, maybe it's also because of my age. I could name a million examples of actors who have become more interesting as they get older. You can't be an ingenue forever, right? Hartnett first met Shyamalan at the premiere of The Village in 2004, where they went for dinner afterwards and nerded out over film. He'd always wanted to work with him precisely because of how different all his projects were. He's got this reputation as being the sort of king of twists. But I have always looked at him in a different way personally. He's someone who takes on lots of different genres and just enters those genres from a different perspective. He's also another director Hartnett has had to wait for. When he got the call for Oppenheimer from Christopher Nolan, it came some 20 years after they'd spoken about The Dark Knight, which Nolan was working on at the time. Hartnett wasn't much interested in playing Batman, and pitched himself instead for a role in another Nolan film, about rival stage magicians, called The Prestige. The role eventually went to Christian Bale, who Nolan had cast as Batman. It was something of a relief, then, to get the Oppenheimer call all those years later. We didn't have a direct conversation about it, he says, when I asked if Nolan referred to their earlier chat. But the implication was, I'd better take it. You only get so many opportunities with Chris Nolan. He doesn't regret, he says, not pursuing superhero roles. But he does allow. I recognize the missed opportunity to work with a guy like Chris. And I've figured out that as much as you're worried about curating your career to things you're interested in, I don't believe that's the most important thing anymore. It's about finding people who you really trust. Hartnett grew up in St. Paul, Minnesota. His father was a musician, his mother, the girl that likes to go see bands. He describes them as hippies. They were living in a shared living situation with other couples and single people when his mother became pregnant. I ask if it was a commune? I'm not going to say it was a commune. He laughs. It was not a commune. But yes, the way they describe it, it does sound like a commune. His father got a real job as a building manager and bought a house, but his parents soon split up. His mother